Right, hello guys, and welcome back to the channel again. Today we have another update in reference to the boat harness. We want to show you what we did. We don't have a full installation on the harness because we had a mechanic do it because it's a little bit tedious. So you have to have a lot of knowledge to know where each cable goes and how to fit the harness in the right places. So I want to show you overall view of what we did there and what we found, and that's all I can tell you for now. So stay tuned for the video, and here we go. Before we can take off the old harness, we are going around taking off all the clips and tie wraps so we can have it all free, ready to take off. Alright, so the next thing that he started doing is unplugging all the plugs, which in my opinion, if it would have been me doing it, I would not take it all off. I would just unplug one, connect a new one, unplug the next one, and connect the new one, and go down, so on and so forth, until you plug them all together. But in this case, since he knows what he's doing, he just unplugged them all and then just started putting the new harness back in place. Here we have the brand new harness, and yeah, it's a lot of plugs to reconnect, so you got to know what you're doing. The most difficult part was unplugging the starter because of the position that it's at. It's really difficult to get to. Once he had everything unplugged, it was just a matter of making it come loose from all the little holes and crevices here and there. Once he took it all out completely, he was able to pull the whole thing off. Here we have the old harness, and we noticed that one of the plugs leading to one of the fuel pumps was completely coming loose. As a matter of fact, once we pulled out the harness, the connection broke right off. These are the connections for that fuel pump that was coming loose and came off right after we took off the harness. This is the connection. These two things here, they weren't even holding together. I think only maybe one or two strands was holding in place, and as we pulled the harness off, they came loose. This is the old harness, and here's the condition of each of these plugs. They really don't look that bad. So let's see what happens once we put the new one and what the outcome is. So far, the worst that we found is that loose connection to the fuel pump that broke off, and the breaker, the circuit breaker, that also had a leg that was broken off. Those are the worst things we found so far. He's now getting ready to position the harness to start the reinstallation of all the plugs. The harness is completely installed. The mechanic is now connecting the computer to the engine to find any scan codes or error codes that we may have. Here's where we found that the circuit breaker for the engine is faulty and we need to replace it. Alright, we're now going to the next step on the harness installation. When the mechanic was doing the installation on the harness, he found out that the switch actually is a breaker, the circuit breaker It's a 50 amp circuit breaker on the engine was defective. It wouldn't stay on the on position, so we bought a new one that we're going to go ahead and install. So stay tuned, because here we go with the continuation of the harness installation. All right, so here's the location of the circuit breaker for the engine. It's right behind the throttle body here. You'll see the red switch there, and there's a screw right there, and there's one right there. So we're going to loosen those two up so we can take this out completely and replace the circuit breaker right there. Alright, so once I loosened up this one here, took off the screw, put it in a safe place, and then the other side, when you loosen it, it just comes loose completely. So now I'm able to get to these Phillips screwdriver screws here, so I can take off the breaker. Alright, the next thing is taking off the screws. This is gonna loosen up the breaker off this little bracket there. Okay, that's the last screw on the other end, and now the whole thing should come off, and that's the breaker right there. Now this breaker here has been on here for 20 years and has lasted that long, so the new one should give us another 20 years plus. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and take it off from here, the two cables, put it on the same way on the new one. Alright, a little thing I noticed here, the back part of this one and these two holes to hold it in place, it's different than the old one. Looks like the newer ones, they made them like this, but it comes with the two screws for both sides of this. It's a little longer, and it comes with a nut and a washer. So I'm thinking that this is probably going through that there. I gotta check and see, but look at the old one. The old one is thin here. This one is thicker, and then the back side has two lugs, screw lugs, and the old one just have two legs with the screw going through them. So let's see how I could make this adjustment here. Alright, the new breaker is a different configuration completely. The screws that you have for the cables on that one will not be able to work on this one. It doesn't bring enough nuts to do both sides, and the through bolt here to put it in place on the bracket. So I'm gonna have to go out to the hardware store and get some stainless steel screws with nuts and washers, so I can put it through this bracket and through here, and then tighten it up in the back here. So I mean, they always change things, but they should have known that if we had this type, we needed two more nuts and washers to be able to work with this new one. So let's see what happens. I'm going to have to go to the hardware store and get some hardware. So I'm going to try to put it together the way I have it here without putting it on the bracket, so I can test the engine. Since we did the harness, I haven't been able to start the engine because this one is faulty and it doesn't let the engine start. So let's see how it pans out. Hopefully it'll be fine, and all we need is just the two nuts for the through bolts there, and that's it. This is what I found here. If you notice this little thing right here, that's where one of the cables was connected to, and look at it. It's just held by a couple of hairs of wires or whatever it's holding it there. It looks like that may definitely give you some kind of fault on the engine somewhere. I don't know if it's the hesitation that I had, or was this caused by the guy that did the harness. Maybe when he was taking it off and putting the new wires on there, maybe if you just push these too much, you mess them up. This one's pretty firm, but this one, yeah, oops, there it goes. That's it right there, gone. So yeah, it might be it's just 20 years old, so it's just bad. It needed to be changed no matter what. I don't fault anyone. I'm I'm just happy that it happened now and we're able to change it before it happens out there on the water. All right, I have the 2 wires connected on the new breaker. I'm gonna go ahead and test the engine now, make sure everything's working fine before I put it back on the bracket here. I still need to go to the hardware store and get the true bolts to tie it down to the bracket, but I'm gonna go ahead and start that engine now. Since we did the harness, I haven't tested it, so this is the opportunity now to test it. So here we go. Let's see what happens. All right, here we go. Moment of truth. We're going to turn it on for the first time after the harness and the breaker replacement. Okay, that's a good sign right there. And it doesn't start. Okay. Yeah. It just turns and turns but doesn't start. So now I have to call back the harness guy. Since I already have that breaker in place, now I have to call him to come back and see why it doesn't start. Something is not connected correctly somewhere. I checked in the engine compartment to make sure that all connections were made properly and there wasn't any cable that was loose. I did find that the ignition coil cable going to the distributor cap was completely off, and it's just because he probably didn't see it and didn't put it back in place. So I put it back in place and we're ready to restart the engine again. We started the engine finally. It sounded awesome at the beginning. That is until about 4 to 5 minutes, and here we go with the hesitation and wanted to turn off again. We don't know what's going on, but we do know that the harness did not do any change to anything we did here, because the engine is doing exactly the same thing it was doing before. Here we are again. Finally, I was able to turn on the engine after the harness thing, put on the new breaker, and then I searched and I found that the mechanic by mistake probably had pulled the ignition coil on the distributor cap, so that was off. That's why it wouldn't start. But I started it, but it's still doing the hesitation, still doing exactly the same thing. So it wasn't the harness. $1,000 later plus labor, still have the same problem. The overheating, I don't know until we try it out on the water. So we just gotta see. So there's more to come. That's the way it is. BOAT. Bust out another 1,000. So get ready.
Now is a great time to like and subscribe. All you have to do is click on the subscribe button below. It's free, and you'll be part of the Keys Boating channel family. Thanks so much for your support.